Arrma has just released the brand new truck, the Gorgon. And me, like many other people, as soon as we saw this thing, we're like, it looks kind of cool. Think it's two-wheel drive. When you take the body off, we're immediately like, it's just an Arrma Granite Voltage. We've already had one of these. We already know it has some weaknesses. So, even though it's only $140, maybe it's a hard pass. But there's more to this launch than what meets the eye, and that's what we're talking about here today. I got 6 items, plus maybe a bonus one in, to talk about as far as some key differences that make this Gorgon maybe a little bit more appealing than what we initially thought. One of the first things that gave me a hint at the very beginning that maybe we're talking about something different here is actually how the battery loads into the truck. When you start looking at the pictures of the Gorgon, you see a bottom-loaded battery system, and I was like, wait a second. That's very different than what was in the Granite Voltage. If you look at how that worked, it was this awkward side loading thing, and it worked, and it was pretty strong, but sometimes it didn't want to latch right, especially depending on what batteries you were using. How the wires needed to come out of it was awkward. Like it left a little bit to be desired. And now all of a sudden I'm looking at the Gorgon saying, well, wait a second, if that's different, then that means maybe the whole core of this chassis is truly different. And I wonder what else is there. Now, there may be a concern with how this battery loads as far as it does go in from the bottom and it does open to the front. And so if this loading system is not strong and that latch mechanism is not super strong, then there's a chance that while you drive around, not only does the battery door come out and your battery comes out, but it also like pogos the truck by sticking down in the dirt. We don't know yet. We just need to get our hands on it and try it and see if this is actually a valid concern or not. Now, if the chassis is different, then what else is different inside of there? And so we started to look, and the diff itself, the rear diff, which was known as potentially a weak issue, is a completely different part number now. And when you look at the specs, it doesn't say anything on the specs for like exactly how wide it is, but when you set the picture side by side, the new diff looks noticeably wider than the old one. Even if this diff is still made out of plastic, that wider gear with more surface area will immediately give it more strength, so that should really reduce any issues that we have with durability of the diff itself. And then related to right next to the diff is, of course, the spur gear that helps provide power. The old Voltage system had this one-piece spur gear to what they call like lay shaft that goes back in, and that's how it translated that power from the spur through this shaft and into that rear diff. Known if you put brushless power to it and you were really tough on it, this part would strip and you'd have to replace the whole thing. Pretty easy to replace, but there was no metal or aftermarket upgrades for it. Now looking at the Gorgon and the pictures that we see from it, not only is the spur gear beefier, it's actually a 0.8 mod instead of a 0.6. So that means the teeth are actually physically bigger, and you can also see that because it goes from a 93 tooth spur gear all the way down to a 61 tooth spur gear. So although it's physically the dimensions, the physical size is about the same, we have much bigger teeth, which should make the spur gear stronger. And that spur gear is now connected to a metal lay shaft. So we now actually have a metal gear driving in there. So this one major weakness that the Voltage has had is now fixed with the Gorgon. It's a big deal. The fourth item is all about the electronics that are in the vehicle. And so ESC is still an ESC and receiver in one unit, but it is a new and updated spec. Still has a brushed motor, but again, new and updated spec. These are things that you may end up replacing to brushless at some point anyway, but basically I'm going to call it par. Like, it's not really probably much better or worse than what was in the Voltage. And the fifth thing, one of the very interesting pieces that they updated on this was the output shafts out of the differential. So the old style had a completely different style internal differential with metal little stubs sticking out. This now has full metal output shafts. They go to plastic drive shafts, whereas the Voltage actually had metal drive shafts. But there's a caveat to that. The Voltage only had like metal dog bones, and it still had these plastic cups that those went into. And then those plastic cups went into metal shafts that stuck out, and it was really weak. When I did some skate park bashing with the Voltage, I actually bent one of those ever so slightly, and you can see the tire wobbling afterwards. The new shaft designs, although plastic, look like they're modeled after the Arrma 3S lineup from Driveshaft, which means they should be staggeringly stronger than what was in the Voltage, and something that should really last under a lot of power. The sixth difference is the controller itself. The Voltage uses this ATX 101 controller that honestly felt very cheap and kind of bad in the hand, if I'm honest. I didn't like it at all. The Gorgon uses the SLT2, which I'm hoping is actually a little bit better. It at least looks like it's modeled after the standard SLT3s that come in a lot of their ready-to-run vehicles, and still has a 50, 75, 100% power level. So if you're handing this off to someone who you don't trust with all of the power of the vehicle, you can still turn it down using that controller. Again, just like the ESC and motor in here, I'm assuming eventually, if you love this vehicle and you use it a lot, you're probably going to upgrade that controller anyway. There's 6 items that really show that for some of these, they've made some very big improvements, and it kind of actually makes me think I might want this Gorgon now, right? So when I first looked at it and I thought it was just a Voltage with some different body and a different bumpers and different tires, I was like, I don't really want to try that thing out. But now that I see all of the drivetrain difference that they've done to it, it makes me really think about getting it and throwing a brushless setup in it and seeing just how good does it really go. I'm kind of curious. But there's a bonus item here as far as what's also different about it. And a lot of people, when they get into the hobby, they want to build their own vehicles. The Voltage and everything else from Arrma has been ready to run or just ready to put electronics into. This Gorgon is the first time that I've seen them do a ready to assemble. So it's not a full kit. It's not something that comes in just absolutely every individual part, but it comes ready to be assembled, comes with a battery and a charger, everything that you need all in it, and it's been like partially got the components have been put in, and you have to just do all of the final assembly. It's pretty cool, actually. That's a very neat kind of bonus item that Arrma has thrown out there. I'll be very curious over long term to see how many people really like that. It could be a great entryway to let some maybe younger enthusiasts in, and they can feel the excitement of building their own kit without the daunting pieces of it showing up as like literally all the individual itty bitty pieces. They could probably, assemble it in a pretty short time period and get that rewarding experience. With all this said, I think I might be going ahead and buying one of these Gorgons. I'll be curious from some of my, more loyal members that are out there. Let me know down in the comments. What do you think? Like, should I get one and test one of these out now that we've seen more of the differences between it and the Voltage? Or maybe it is more interesting than we thought it was at first. So anyway, let me know down in the comments, and we'll talk to you down there. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.